I'm glad that the Liberals put this attack out today. Really glad. Because there's something that's really been worrying me.
The Globe and Mail released a hit job today on the Conservatives, one that CSIS has already debunked. However, it seems that Pierre was just waiting for a reporter to ask him about it today at a press conference, and he responded to that by playing an ace he's had up his sleeve this whole time: the links between Mark Carney and China.
Let's take a look. CSIS alleges India organized support for Poilievre's 2022 Conservative leadership bid. Now, when we came across this, we were really confused as to why this was even a story, because this had already been talked about in the Hogue Commission, and it was literally a nothing burger. But isn't it interesting how something like this is released on the second day of the election, a day after Mark Carney got blasted by all the opposition parties and people in Quebec for not joining the TVA debate? So it's very interesting that this article ended up in the Globe and Mail.
Interesting is one word for it.
Let's take a look.
Agents of India and their proxies allegedly meddled in the 2022 election of Pierre Poilievre as Conservative Party leader as part of a larger effort to cozy up to politicians of all parties, according to a source with top secret clearance. The source said the Canadian Security Intelligence Service learned that the Indian agents were involved in raising money and organizing within the South Asian community for Mr. Poilievre during the leadership race, which he won handedly. But the CSIS assessment did not indicate that this effort was done in a sweeping and highly organized way, the source said. Mr. Poilievre won the first ballot with 68% of the vote. CSIS also did not have evidence that Mr. Poilievre or members of his inner circle were aware of the alleged actions of India's agents and their proxies, said the source, who had a national security clearance to see top secret reports. The Globe and Mail is not identifying the source because they were not authorized to disclose the classified information publicly. CSIS did not share this information with Mr. Poilievre, the source said, because he does not have the necessary security clearance to access secret documents and receive classified briefings on foreign interference activities in Canada. Mr. Poilievre is the only federal party leader who has declined an offer to obtain a security clearance. What a hit piece! I mean, all of this information was already made public through the Hogue report, but I think what is most concerning here is how they had to harp on it again that Poilievre does not have a security clearance in order to receive this information. Well, here's the thing. Whether an individual has security clearance or not isn't even relevant here, because they can receive something called a TRM, or threat reduction measure. It's a report that's typically given to them by CSIS, and it describes any actions against them, whether or not the person is directly involved or even has knowledge of it.
Now, the dirtiest part about this opening part of the article is it says CSIS didn't inform Poilievre because he did not have security clearance to receive these documents, and then goes on to say that he's the only one of the leaders that hasn't. Here's why this is dirty. Because this incident that they're talking about took place when Pierre wasn't even leader. He was running to be Conservative leader. So that's the first part. The second part is this occurred in 2022. Now, these briefings and security clearance was only offered to the party leaders, in 2023 by Justin Trudeau, towards the end of it, after receiving a whole bunch of pressure from Poilievre, from, ironically, Jagmeet Singh, and from Yves Blanchette of the Bloc. So for them to just lump this all into one paragraph is really, really dishonest from a journalist perspective. Like, the Globe and Mail is sometimes pretty balanced, but this is really, really dirty to just throw that in there as an implication. Like, it's dirty. But here's probably the most important part of this entire article.
In a statement Monday, CSIS spokesperson Lindsay Sloan said that the agency testified during the Hogue inquiry that there was no reason to believe, quote, impacted candidates would have been aware of the alleged support, end quote, from India during the 2022 Conservative leadership race.
They also went on to testify in the Hogue Commission that they also believe that the interference had no impact on the outcome of the Conservative leadership race. So let's just recap here, folks. So this is a major story that had to be broken today that we already knew the contents of from the Hogue Commission back when it was released. And the contents were this. India tried to interfere in the leadership race. They did so in a disorganized way. The Conservatives didn't know. Pierre Poilievre didn't know. CSIS didn't brief them because they didn't have access, because they couldn't have access, because they wouldn't have been granted access at that point in time, and it didn't impact the leadership race whatsoever. So the question of the Globe and Mail is, why the hell is this even a story? Oh, right, because that's somebody that you're talking about with top secret clearance. Folks, that's not necessarily somebody in CSIS. That could be somebody in the Trudeau-Carney cabinet. That could be from Privy Council. If they haven't revoked Trudeau's actual security status, could have come from him. Guess what? Mark Carney has top secret clearance right now, so it could have been him. Now, the likely scenario here, we have no evidence to prove this, but the likely scenario here is that Carney took such a kick to the face yesterday based on his press conferences and what he said and didn't say, and the fact that he pulled out of the TVA issue, is he wanted the media to change the page on this. So they leaked, or not even leaked, but encouraged the Globe and Mail to write this story in order to try to change the conversation from Carney can't speak French to, look, Pierre's possibly under the influence of the Indian government, and oh look, he's irresponsible because he's still not getting his security clearance. So that is where this hit piece has come out, and it's gross, man. Now,
it is gross because the majority of left-leaning people that I'm seeing on social media are all going back to the security clearances. This was even before this article had come out, because the media has done such a job of spinning it in a way that they make it sound like Pierre Poilievre is incapable of getting a security clearance or refuses to get a security clearance because he believes he may not pass. The reality is that Pierre has had a security clearance in the past and will get a security clearance again when he becomes prime minister.
Right. Ironically, the only person who seems to agree with Pierre Poilievre about this was the guy who was the leader of the official opposition, Tom Mulcair. Again, we don't agree with Tom on everything, but we agree with him on this, and that it would effectively muzzle him. So, anyhow, Pierre was asked about this today, and boy, oh boy, was he ready.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Pierre. I'm Surya from Y Media.
Yes, sir.
So, Globe and Mail has done a story on election interference on Conservative leadership campaign. What are your comments on that?
Well, first of all, let's quote from that Globe and Mail article. I'm going to quote here. CSIS also did not have evidence that Mr. Poilievre or members of his inner circle were aware of these alleged actions. Then I'm going to quote the Hogue Commission, and I quote, "The Commission heard testimony about allegations of the government India interference in the Conservative Party leadership race. CSIS witnesses noted that they had no reason to believe the impacted candidates would have been aware of the alleged support." Let's be honest. I won the leadership fair and square. Even my political competitors, like Mr. Patrick Brown, have publicly testified under oath that that was the case. But I'm glad that the Liberals put this attack out today. Really glad. Because there's something that's really been worrying me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a man who is about to unleash a political nuclear bomb on Mark Carney. Like, it just feels like he's been saving this for a rainy day. And it may not have been raining. Looks like it was snowing, but seems like that was good enough.
After Justin Trudeau named Mark Carney his economic advisor, giving him massive power over public policy in Canada, Mr. Carney went over for meetings in Beijing where he just had secret talks with the deputy governor of the Chinese central bank. 2 weeks later, Brookfield got a $250 million loan. What did they talk about? What did Mr. Carney in his role as Trudeau's economic advisor offer China? Why would he be having secret meetings with top government-controlled bankers about getting a $250 million loan while he was supposed to be acting in Canada's interest as the Prime Minister's economic advisor? Why would he be collaborating with a hostile foreign regime that we have since learned executed 4 Canadians and took numerous Canadians hostage for a lengthy period of time? And given that Mr. Carney knows that he still owns massive financial interests in Brookfield, which owes a $250 million to a Chinese state-controlled bank, how do we know he's not going to act against our interests in favor of his financial interests? Why didn't he stand in front of this microphone and confess to Canadians that he owes the Chinese government that kind of money? Is this why he's covering up his financial interests? And given that China has murdered our people, taken our people hostage, how is he ever going to stand up to foreign interference when he is so financially compromised? We have never in our history had a weak, out-of-touch leader so terribly compromised and conflicted, whose interests go against our national interests. And I call on Mr. Carney right now to come before a microphone today and explain if this loan is still in place and if he still has those Brookfield assets that he had up until a few weeks ago. Because we cannot trust someone. Could you imagine, while you're supposed to be advising Canada's Prime Minister on the well-being of our economy, going to a foreign regime that had executed Canadian citizens, taken Canadians hostage, that it had already been public that they had interfered in multiple elections. They've done incursions into our northern waters. Mark Carney will never be able to protect our national interests because he has massive financial conflicts of interest overseas. What we need now is not to give the Liberals a 4th term with a weak and compromised leader. What we need is a Prime Minister who will put Canada first for a change.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot of implications in here, and it makes me think that they've had this just waiting for a while, and this isn't necessarily brand new information, but it will be brand new information to the general public. And you may be wondering, well, why haven't the Conservatives talked about this till then? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. So number one, he talked about this $250 million loan that he got from China. If you've watched our interview with Sam Cooper recently, Sam Cooper talked about this in that interview and talked about this as one of the reasons that Mark Carney is so financially obligated to China. So now it's not just Sam Cooper that's talking about that. Bloomberg actually wrote about something as well, and it confirms Pierre's timeline here. So this is an article from November 2024. This is 2 months after Mark Carney accepted publicly the role of financial advisor with Justin Trudeau. So this says Brookfield Asset Management, which is Carney's company, is in talks with banks to refinance a loan that had backed its purchase of a Shanghai-based office tower complex 5 years ago, according to people familiar with the matter. The Canadian asset manager has an offshore senior loan of around $700 million due year-end that funded its purchase of the mixed-use property site from Greenland Hong Kong Holdings Limited in 2019, said the people, asking not to be identified as the matter is private. The overall financing package comprises offshore and onshore components. The size of the new offshore piece in discussion could be over $900 million, and Brookfield is in the process of getting bank commitments, said one of the people. Meanwhile, the company has secured a 15-year onshore loan of 1.96 billion won, or $250 million that we've been talking about from the Bank of China that pays an annual interest rate of around 4%, the person said. A spokesperson for Brookfield declined to comment. Bank of China didn't immediately offer comment. So, folks, Brookfield has a bunch of financial interests in real estate in China.
Therefore, our Prime Minister has a bunch of financial interests in real estate in China.
So, this comes back to, why would the Conservatives be kind of dropping this now? Well, here's a reason. They probably assumed that Mark Carney wasn't going to be talking about his assets in the public, didn't want them to know, and were waiting to have him already submit that to the Ethics Commissioner. Because once he submits that, Ethics Commissioner already has all that information. So if that includes some of this stuff, then that's essentially quote-unquote locked in, and that will become public later. So they wouldn't want to start talking about that and kind of allow Mark Carney time to move the shells around and maybe divest himself of some of this stuff so that when it does become public, that's not going to be there. So now, because we're in the electoral period, that has already been submitted. And at this point, Mark Carney can't really do anything. He can't really do anything. And if he does, that's fine. But his original disclosure is already with the Ethics Commissioner. So it potentially puts him in quite the bind and maybe even a panic mode for what the next questions are going to be, because he's already said, all right, come and talk about this. And this is the problem, right? Because you have a guy that has financial interest in this package. We don't know what it is, and we won't know what it is until potentially after the election, unless Mark Carney chooses to disclose this. And he could be financially obligated to the tune of $250 million to a nation. Now think about this, because all the Liberals have been talking about is the tariffs that have come on us from the United States, 25%. They're not talking about the 100% tariff that China just put on us. I wonder why that is.
Maybe because somebody's financially beholden to the Chinese government, is it?
Right. And the question is what else is there? And Pierre makes a valid point. You accepted a job as a financial advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada. Why was one of the first things that you did is jet off to China and secure $250 million loan for your own company? 2 months before Justin Trudeau resigns, and about 2.5 months before you launch your leadership race.
But you know, the thing that upsets me the most, I think, is that many more Canadians will see this story about Pierre and what had happened in 2022 with the leadership race and the fact that he doesn't have, or he does have a security clearance. All government employees have a security clearance, but that he did not get the NSICOP security clearance. And they will see that instead of this story with Mark Carney. So we're asking you, MP Nation, to please help push this out. When you're talking to people, please make them aware of this, because this is huge.